Welcome to the Proctors History Project effort. Today is August 19th, 2013. I'm Karen Johnson, and I'm interviewing Frank Duci, who has been mayor of Schenectady and has a wealth of history about Proctors. And you were talking to me about how even when you were a child you came here. What are your memories?
Oh, the good old days, yeah. That's when trolley cars, and you used to pay about 5 cents to come down, and we used to watch the silent film. But this was about 1934, I guess it was, you know. And I was only about 13 years old at that time, you know. And but I can recall, you know, the days that we'd sit here and go through, bring our lunch, as a matter of fact, and see the film twice. That's what we used to do in those days.
For one fee, right?
For one fee, that's exactly right.
Do you remember about what it cost?
Oh, at that time, I think it was something like 10 or 15 cents to come in, yeah. And because that's what we used to pay to go to the Rialto on Van Branken Avenue, and we used to come down here to see some of the better film, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did the theater look pretty much the way it looks today, as far as you recall?
Oh, yes, because it was put together, you know, by Mr. Proctor in 1925, and so in 1935 when we came down here,
Be pretty new.
It was beautiful. Yeah, like brand new.
So you came with other kids.
That's right. Yeah, usually there'd be about 4 of us. Yeah, and we, as I say, we used to bring our lunch and watch the film twice.
So did you have a favorite place you sat in the theater?
Well, we used to sit toward the front.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were the audiences really full?
The audiences were real good, to tell you the truth, yes. Yeah, and a couple of times we sat up in the boxes, you know, and we enjoyed that. But usually that was taken, you know, before we got there.
You have to get there earlier.
Yeah, we'd have to get there early. Yeah.
And do you remember anything about the arcade? Were there stores in it, any of them that you might remember? Or?
Well, we didn't pay too much attention to the arcade. There were stores, but
You wanted to see that
movie. We didn't have the money. We went there for the movie.
Okay.
That's right.
Well, then, as your life progressed, you got involved in the early days of Proctors.
Oh, yes.
And so do you want to tell me about your first memories of Proctors when it began to be a subject where people thought maybe it could be saved?
Well, when I became mayor, I met John Hardin, and John Hardin was very familiar. He was working with Dr. Alexanderson, who invented television. And so I can recall when John Hardin was talking to me about Dr. Alexanderson coming here and showing for the first time on public television, you know, to the general public, off Proctor's stage. So that's some history, you know, actually that belongs to the Proctors, you know, because it was a first in the United States, or in the world, really, with Dr. Alexanderson. And so I do remember what John Hardin said about Mr. Proctor's, you know, who put the Proctors Theater together in 1925, and the public television was in 1928. And then, of course, I do remember in the good old days when I was, in later years, when we were involved with Proctor's Theater, the renovation process. And I remember this little old Italian coming into my office, and he wanted to volunteer because we were renovating it. He wanted to volunteer to work there. And I thought, you know, how can a man like that, you know, work and do anything that was, you know, as far as the renovation goes? But he was the original person who put together the architectural things in Proctor's Theater in 1925. So we hired him, and he did a good job.
So nobody seems to know his name that I've found yet, but it would be fun to try and find out.
See, I don't know. I've been looking through, I've got some of the history here. I've been looking through some of my data, and I haven't been able to find his name. But he was a terrific guy, and he did a terrific job, you know, as Kay Rosenthal and Marty Moore and everybody else, you know, would acknowledge.
Well, there came a time when the city owned the theater.
Yeah, well, we owned it. As a matter of fact, the theater was going sort of downhill, and we gave them $200,000, the mayor and the city council, myself and the city council. And then a few years later, they still had a problem, and I had offered up a raffle to help offset the costs. And I explained how they did that in Radio City and so forth. And Mr. Goldberg and Dennis Madden says, no, we can't do that. So I bought a lotto ticket, and I won $65, and I gave it to Proctors, to the city, and they gave it to Proctors.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, as I recall, the city took the theater over on a tax foreclosure, and
Yes.
so the city was the owner for
Oh, yeah.
a while.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, this other group called ACTS,
Yeah, well, we turned, as a matter of fact, initially, they wanted to take and give the theater over to the bank, and I raised holy heck. I was a councilman at that time. And the city council and the mayor decided not to give it to the bank. And then, as such, you know, the theater did get back on its feet again. And finally, we gave the key over to Kay Rosenthal, and she gave me $1 for it. And as a matter of fact,
tell us the dollar story,
yeah,
because this
as
is
a matter of
complicated.
fact, they gave me $1, and about a year, almost 2 years later, Marty Moore sees me and says, you know, we'd like to have that $1 back. And so finally I said, well, okay, I did set it aside, and I finally picked it up, and we gave it back to Marty Moore.
Now, there's been some discussion that it was a silver dollar, but it wasn't. It was a
No,
paper dollar, right?
It was a paper dollar.
And Marty wanted it back because she thought it'd be fun to have it to display here.
That's right.
And you were all good with that,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So you gave it to Marty Moore,
That's right.
and wherever it is,
And they
it's
took it over.
been given
right.
to Proctors.
They did a good job. Matter of fact, one other thing that I did in 1997, I wrote to Dick Clark in Hollywood, and I asked him if he couldn't take and give Dr. Alexanderson's daughter, who lived here in the city, and make her award her an Emmy Award, you know, in memory of her father, Dr. Alexanderson, who invented television. And he wrote back, and he says, that sounds like a great idea, but right now we're going through our 50th TV anniversary, and we're very busy on that. But as soon as that's over, we'll take care of that, and we'll do it off Proctor's stage, as you said, you know. But it never happened. He never wrote back again. That was sad.
Oh, dear.
And she passed away, finally. Yeah.
Do you remember being on stage with Kay Rosendahl and all the councilmen? And
Oh, yeah.
she announced she was giving us a chair in our name in the
Right.
audience.
Right. Yeah, that was a thrilling event as well.
That was the night of Blackstone, as I recall.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was a pretty exciting time.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got some things, as I showed you a little earlier, you know, that go back a few years, and like Schenectady's home of many television firsts. And actually, Proctor's is a very important part of that, with Dr. Alexanderson, you know, being here to have the first public TV. And I've saved all of that stuff, you know. And if
You are a
Proctor's
great
wants it-
saver, aren't you?
Yeah, oh yeah, as a matter of fact, I've got, since 1959, going through 1995, loose leaf notebooks with all the news information in them, you know, city, county, and some state. And so I was just thinking, I'd like to give that to the Historic Society. You think they'd want it?
Well, you should ask them.
Yeah.
they have somebody would want it
Yeah.
because it's a wonderful
I've got
record.
them all boxed up. I don't know what to do with them. to tell
Well,
you the truth.
maybe after people learn about this, you'll have some calls.
Right. Well,
Did you-
Proctors Theater is a gem, you know, and it always has been, and historically is so important because it's one of the many theaters that have done so many things, and especially when it comes to the first TV presentation to the general public. That's so very important.
Do you remember that at the time the city owned the theater, there was a program called CETA?
CETA?
It was a manpower training program to help people get jobs.
Yeah. No, I don't
And a
know.
lot of those people came over here and worked, painting, cleaning,
Uh-huh.
and they were paid for with federal dollars.
Oh.
So that was a decision that you were involved in, actually, but
Yeah.
it was CETA, or
Oh,
no,
okay.
SETA,
I see.
Schenectady
Yeah, okay.
Employment
Schenectady
and Training.
Oh, yes, now I do remember that, yes, yeah.
And that, the fact that the city put all the workers over here
right.
gave everyone a big boost.
Right, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that the city paid, there was a lot of roof problems here,
Uh-huh.
and it seems like the city
Yeah.
helped pay
Well,
for
we
some
put
of
in
those.
a couple of $100,000 into it. Yeah, I remember that very clearly. And the city council went along with it, and it was they needed it, and that's right, a lot of that repair work happened at that time.
Because this corporation had no money.
No, that's right.
You remember
I
that?
remember that, yep.
So
But
they-
they've all done a terrific job to this day. And that's, you know, you have to be very proud of all the work that the people have done since, you know, since the days of 1925, the work that they put in Proctors Theater. Yeah.
Well, it's been a great asset to our
Oh,
community.
yeah. An asset to
Did-
Schenectady.
Can you remember any shows you particularly liked that you saw here?
No, there were Western shows that we saw. That's what we were always in favor of seeing, you know. And I was trying to think of some of the names, but I don't know. My memory is not too well when it comes to names of those old people.
Well, you must have seen the Blackstone show because you were here at the...
Right.
And that was their first show after so many years.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you were aware of it, but just as we've been doing these interviews, we've learned that there was a plumbing failure that night. Did you know about
no,
that?
I didn't know about that.
See, neither did I when I was in the audience.
Oh.
So a lot of volunteers and Dennis and others
Right.
worked very hard behind the scenes to
right.
make all this work.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you'd like to tell us about Proctors and your...
No, only that, you know, we're very proud of it. And as a matter of fact, when Maria Como used to come to my office, we talked in terms of Proctors because he brought up the Radio City Music Hall, and I talked about Proctors, and he enjoyed it very, very much. As a matter of fact, you know, I showed you the declaration that he put together, and he mentioned Proctors and the great theater that it was. Yeah.
Good.
So Proctors has been the subject matter of many people, and everybody that I talked to just loved Proctors. Yeah.
Well, you were a big part of making this succeed, so
Well,
we thank you for that.
very proud of that, and thank the people for supporting us. Yep. Yeah, loved it. Proctors has been one of my favorites ever since we were kids.
Good. Well, I want to thank all of you for watching the Proctors History Project, and thank you, Frank Duci, for appearing today. This is Karen Johnson, and I hope you've enjoyed our show today.